Well, hello everyone. Welcome to a very special Q&A, AMA, and other acronyms that have the letter A in them. My name is Steven. I'm the designer, creator, illustrator, graphic designer, copy editor, web designer, animator, editor. I do some other stuff for Fables End. And I'm here to answer some questions that you put onto, I just spit a lot, right? I just went put and it went, which is pretty gross. No takes, all one take. We're doing this in one take, baby. I'm here to answer some of your questions. And yeah. This is the user by the name of Peanut Buffer, who's been on our Discord for a while. Great contributor, likes everything. We like that. Well, when it comes to designing cards, I think that I generally prefer top-down because top-down, I think, creates more immersive gaming experiences. I prefer to start with source material and then try to figure out how that source material translates into mechanics for Fables End. Sometimes it's more successful than others, and sometimes it is really great. But sometimes it doesn't quite work because the mechanics of the game don't necessarily follow the flavor of the source material. But I do believe strongly that all the source material can be synthesized into the game in some way, and I try to do that with every design, particularly with fairy tales because they're so flavorful. I try to make every card that we design around a character or situation or a notable event in a story to reflect what that story is about through the mechanics in a way that makes sense. You'll see more as the expansions come out for the game and as we start exploring more characters in fairy tales and storybooks, that will become more apparent. Sometimes we need to go bottom up because we are there might be a requirement in the meta that, or there's a hole in a deck or a hole in a set where we need to find something mechanically that will kind of balance what's going on with the rest of the game. So sometimes we have to do a bottom up. And it's usually like something where we're like, we need a character, we need a card that fits into this category. But generally speaking, I think almost all of them are top down. And I prefer top down. I think top down is like the way to go for the game. Okay, so a funny story about that is, well, it's not a funny story. There's nothing, it's not humorous. It's just a story. The game actually started a long time ago. I think I started developing a certain aspect of the system like 10 to 12 years ago. And that design, I just kept creating permutations of that design. And there was like one specific mechanic that just kept coming back up where I was like, I like this idea, there's something to this, I just have to make it work. And I would take it to a point where I thought I liked it, and then I would playtest it, and then I would get really frustrated with it, and then I would put it on a shelf and leave it for a while, maybe for a year, maybe for a few months. And then a few months later, or several months later or years later, I would see something that would inspire me to pick it up again. And so I'd take it off the shelf, and then I would work on it and tweak the system and try something new and try different angles. And so the game kind of came together through these multiple iterations of earlier versions where I would kind of add something, but then not know exactly where the end game was. And then like I would say 6 years ago, I really hit on exactly what it was. And the fairy tale theme actually even though I was saying how much I love top-down design earlier, the fairy tale theme kind of got planted onto the mechanism and the system because it just worked really, really well. It just felt right when I was making the mechanics. It was always going to be a fantasy card game of some kind, but the fairy tale theme specifically didn't come until later, which is unusual because usually I like to start with an idea and then kind of build mechanics around it. But the fairy tale theme came later. Yeah, so that's that. There's going to be a lot of weird edits in this video. Yes. Yes, we do. I went to Gen Con in 2017, and it was the first time that I had really debuted the game. I had people playtest it before, and I'd gotten feedback from that, but it was the first time that I really like playtested it in the wild. And this is an earlier version of Fables End, but it was very close to what it is now. What it is now is just a very cleaned up version of that other version. And I remember being super stressed out the very first day of Gen Con. A lot of things went awry for that convention. My Airbnb ended up falling through because I got there and I took one look at it and I was like, this looks like a crack house. I'm not going to stay here. And then I ordered a big backdrop, and the backdrop, the company that I wanted to use, they printed it out, and I was driving from Michigan to Indianapolis, and the company that I wanted to use had printed it out, and I arrived at their store to pick it up, and I took one look at it, and I was like, this is not good. All the colors are wrong. It looked awful, and I was like, I'm not going to take this. This is not good. It's not good enough. It looks terrible. And so the manager was like, well, we'll try to fix it. And I ended up driving away and going to check into my Airbnb, and they called me later and they were like, yeah, we don't know how to fix this. So I didn't have my backdrop, and all I had was my brother's laptop, and my brother's laptop was really old. And so I had to end up calling my roommates and saying like, hey, can you upload this file in pieces to my email? Can you send me email? So they were on my computer at my apartment, uploading files from my Fables End folders and dropping them in emails, and Google driving me these folders, and my brother's computer was opening them up, and it was so slow, and I kept trying to upload it onto this website that I found that would print things overnight. And long story short, it was 3 or 4 in the morning. I had been trying all night to upload this file, but the internet connection was so slow that I ended up having to leave, get in the rental car that I had, drive to a Kinko's, which was like 40 minutes away, and get on their computer there, upload the files that I had onto that computer, then send it to the printing company that would print me a backdrop, and I had to pay a surcharge to have them do it overnight. And so I ended up going to bed I think I went to bed at 4:30, and I woke up at like 7 that morning, and then got all my stuff together, ended up going to the convention and sitting down, and my brother was with me, and he ended up leaving because he had the other badge that I had. He left, and my girlfriend, she flew in, but her flight didn't get in until later. So I had like an hour and a half to myself at the convention. And this was a Thursday, so it was like the first day that people were coming in. And I had my game set up on a table. I had some display stuff. I had no backdrop. I didn't have anything, no real signage. I had some like big cards that I'd printed out. And 2 people came by, they sat down, and they, one of them, this is the first time that anyone had ever played the game outside of my friend group, outside of people I knew, or people that were friends of friends. It was like a total stranger who sat down, and we played a full game, and the whole time I was like, how is this going to go? It was a make or break moment. And I think the game ended up being like a 45-minute long game, and we finished, and I think he won or I won. I think I won the game. And there was this moment where I just looked up at him, and there was this pause, and I was like, what's going to happen? What's he going to say? How does he feel about this? And he looked at me and he just went, that was great. I want to buy a copy. And I was like, that moment was it was a life affirming moment, because it meant, oh, I made something that somebody finds enjoyable. And it was clear to me from that moment. I was like, okay, there's something here, and someone likes this. I'm not crazy. And so that was one of my favorite moments. There are many others. I could tell other stories about people who have sat down, who've really enjoyed the game. But generally speaking, when someone does a demo and they get what we're trying to go for with Fables End, and it really speaks to them, and they express that, and they say, this is great, how do I get this? I want to play this more. Those are my favorite moments. If I were a card in the game, who would I be? That's a really tough question. And I'm not trying to dodge it. This is not a dodge. There's a part of me in all the cards, because I make all the cards. The core set cards are all my idea and my creation. So expansion cards are different, because expansion cards, this is after I met Kwame, and Kwame is a huge part of this whole project now. So he's integral, and he's contributed so much to the development of cards, and he's brought a lot of new ideas in. So the cards that are coming out in expansions are a combination of both of us. But the core set cards are pretty much me. So it's hard to say. It's like, sometimes I feel like I'm a Crimson Avenger, and sometimes I feel like I'm an Ocean Mother, and sometimes I feel like I'm the Gang of Thieves. It's hard to say like who I identify as. I think cards that I really love playing, though, are cards like Abysmal Construct, which is a unit that when it comes into play, you drop plus 1,000 counters on it equal to the amount of humans in your losses. I tend to really like that kind of a card, that is contingent upon, like, you're losing, but because you're losing, you're getting an advantage. And I think those cards are really fun. So I think it's probably Abysmal Construct, but I can also make an argument for all of them. So I hope that's like a satisfying answer. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Okay. This is like a very meaty question, because the motivation for me always comes from a place of just pure love and unadulterated passion for TCGs. Every TCG, I love some aspect of it. I admire it for what it is. I have in the same way that like an auto mechanic can open the hood of a car and just admire the engineering and the way that all of the engine and all of its parts come together and how they all work. And that person can understand all the interconnections between all of the different mechanisms that make the engine and the car move, and they can appreciate just on a very basic level how every car is put together. I feel that way about TCGs. And some of them I love more than others, but all of them I love to some degree. And I have learned how to play or have played as many as I can possibly get my hands on. So the market at the moment has a lot of TCGs. There's a lot that just came out. And fortunately or unfortunately, the timing of the way that the Fables End project has come together has coincided with a very competitive market for TCGs. And I think at the time, where what I thought I'd created was it was at a time where there just weren't as many other card games competing. But there was always card games competing. That's the thing. It's like, even if you have your big three, you also have all of these kind of satellite games. You know, if you have like a tier 1 big three, then you have tier 2 and tier 3, and then tier 4. Tier 4 is usually only last, you know, their initial release, and then they're gone. Tier 3 might have 2 or 3 expansions, and then they're gone. The second tier might have a few years in it, or they just find a niche audience and they never quite break into the mainstream, but they stick around for a long time. I think of games like Weiss Schwarz and to a certain extent Dragon Ball Super, or even more esoteric titles like Doomtown Reloaded, which has been around for a long time. I think they're going on 10 years and there's still an audience for it, and they're still making new cards for it. Great game. If you get a chance to play it, it's great. It's really, really fun. It's a super cool game. There's like a weird thing about making TCGs that I've learned over the years, and that if you go too far off the beaten path, you'll struggle to find an audience. But if you go too close to what already exists, then that audience will say, well, why would I play this game when I can play a better game? You know, I can play the OG. Why would you play a Magic clone when I can just play Magic, right? And it's hard to find the middle ground where you're doing something that feels unique enough to where you're creating your own stamp in the field, while also not alienating the core audience that's already there. Because generally speaking, TCG players really only want to play TCGs. Or scratch that. It's not that they only want to play TCGs. It's just that they're looking for a certain kind of TCG experience. So if you take Magic players, you can't give them a game that's too far removed from Magic, because it doesn't capture the same feeling that they get from Magic. And it's a really weird conundrum, because it's not like I intended to break into the field with these aspirations to like destroy Yu-Gi-Oh! Or slay the dragon that is Magic the Gathering. I just wanted to make something I thought was cool, and I wanted to do it in such a way that challenged myself as a designer to make something that didn't do what other card games are doing, but also captured all of the elements that make the genre so enthralling. The main influences are games like... It's weird because some of the games that I'm influenced by, I'm influenced to move away from. It's hard not to cite Magic, because Magic is the granddaddy of all TCGs. And in a way, it influenced me because I wanted to make a game that captured sort of the essence of Magic, but felt mechanically totally different. And so I looked at a lot of games like Netrunner, Doomtown Reloaded, which used to be called Deadlands back in the 90s. I always really loved that game, and I loved that the flavor of that game. Cardfight Vanguard. I think that I don't know, maybe people, this could be a hot take. I think Cardfight Vanguard has an amazing system. I think it really did something for the TCG scene that other games hadn't really seen. Even if it is an evolution of something else like Duel Masters. Games like, I think One Piece card game is really cool. Oh man, oldie but a goodie. This game called Guardians came out in 1994. It only ran for a few sets. I think it had 4 sets. And that game, visually and thematically and mechanically, is really unlike any other TCG. It's kind of like a board game. back in the early 90s, card games, trading card games were kind of, it was like the Wild West. And um, it was basically like every game that came out played completely different from another game. Now you get a lot of TCGs are very similar mechanically. They kind of follow a similar formula, and then everything else is like a variation on a different idea. You know, um, and there have been leaps and strides in how that works mechanically. Um, but a lot of those games tend to follow a similar philosophy. And the games in the 90s were just like crazy. They're just like crazy games. They're just like, what are we doing? Um, and so Guardians is a huge one. Rage, oh my god, Rage. Rage TCG, huge. Love that game. It's a game about werewolves. And if you've, it's called Werewolf the Apocalypse is the material that it's based on. But I love the flavor of that game. The game's just oozing with flavor. If you ever get a chance to like look into that game, look into Rage, I love that game. Is also another game that does not play like anything you've ever played before. It is a completely different style of game than a game like Magic. It is not, you have life points, I have life points. It's like, you have a pack of werewolves, I have a pack of werewolves. I'm trying to kill your werewolves so that I can get a certain amount of victory points to win the game. But there's a combat deck, and then there's another deck that has all your allies and equipment and spells and everything in it. And it's a lot of fun. It's a but really unique style of play. All the werewolves that you have are double-sided. Really, really, really cool game. I really loved that game growing up. Didn't really get to play it that often, but I would go to the store and buy Rage cards. They were also really cheap, which helped. I bought like 50 packs of Rage cards, and I think I spent like $50. L5R, the newer L5R, both of them actually, the old version and the new version, the AEG version and the Fantasy Flight version. I really, really like that game. I think that game was underrated. I think it deserved to live longer than it went with the FFG run. It's a very like crunchy, meaty, thinky game. You play a game of L5R and it's like 45 minutes to an hour, but it's really engrossing. It's like super, you're really like considering how you play. It's not just like, do I get my big beater and play and then swing in and win the game? It's like, if I make a miscalculation, I can lose the game. And there's all these like resource systems that are set to, if I overbid on something, or if I underbid, then I suffer. And there's lots of things to calculate. There's lots of risk reward in that game. It's really, really cool. It's a very, very dynamic TCG. Again, it's a shame that it ended up not lasting that long. I think Game of Thrones LCG also very, very cool. I love the design of that game. I love like choosing a plot card, and that kind of determines how you play your turn. I don't love everything about it, but I like a lot of it. But yeah, there's so many TCG influences. Like every TCG that I learned, anything that doesn't play like a normal TCG was an influence for Fables End.